Chapter 51. Are you ready for Mummy, darling? She came staggering into her bedroom, naked except for her red high heels, as he lay reading Dennis the Menace in the Beano comic. She had a bent joint in her mouth, with an inch of ash on the tip, and a fume of alcohol filled the air, along with the pungent rubbery smell of the burning drug. Moments later, she sat heavily on the side of the bed and looked down in surprise as ash fell onto the carpet. Her long red hair tumbled around her face like a stage curtain coming down on the first act. She gave him the joint and told him to draw on it. He did so out of duty. Then she told him to draw on it again and slid her hand under the duvet, taking hold of him. His head began swimming, and he left a tingling deep, and he felt a tingling deep in his belly, and burning embarrassment. Her grip on him was starting to feel deeply erotic. She flipped her flaccid, wrinkled body under the sheets beside him and tossed his comic into the floor, then gripped his penis harder in her hand and began to massage it gently. Despite himself, he felt it enlarge until suddenly it was so painfully stiff it hurt. Mummy can make that better, she whispered. Oh, you're such a big boy, so big, so handsome. So many women will want you, but they are dirty women, unclean women. You're too good for the trash out there. You are Mummy's very special boy, Mummy's big boy. Let me feel my big boy inside me. Now Bryce was remembering Valentine's Day 3 months later. When he was 16, he had been out drinking for the first time with the only person he connected with at school, Ricky Healy. They were tall and mature, looking for the age, and no one had challenged them in the pubs. Ricky was an outsider like himself. He had a pretty face and a clumsy, gangly body. They were the only two boys in the class who didn't have girlfriends. Not even a crush, let alone dated a girl. Bryce didn't date any girls up. Bryce didn't chat any girl up. He was scared of how his mother would react. That morning he and Ricky had each received 10 Valentine cards, much to the apparent astonishment of their classmates. They were filled with individual and deeply personal declarations of love and cravings from secret admirers. For a brief while they were taken in until the smirks of their classmates gave the game away. That night he and Ricky went on a drinking binge. They walked through Camp Town to a series of pubs. Several were Ricky said he knew how to get free drinks. In each of them, much older men stood them pints and whiskey chasers and chatted to them. In each pub, as soon as they had drained their glasses, Ricky would grab Bryce's arm and lead him away, ignoring the pleas of whoever had brought him the drinks to stay. It was the first time Bryce had drunk alcohol, and as he staggered home up the steep hill past Queen's Park, veering unsteadily across the pavement and clinging on to an equally unsteady Ricky Healy, he felt anger smouldering inside him. They staggered into Freshfield Road and crossed the wide street to the terrace house where he lived. Thanks, he said to Ricky, for helping me home. Not sure. Not sure how. He stopped, his vision blurry. Suddenly Ricky lunged forward, pressing his lips against his. Hey! Bryce pushed him away. Ricky persisted, cupping Bryce's face hard with his hands, pressing his lips against his mouth and pushing his tongue inside. Bryce responded by bringing his right leg up as hard as he could into Healy's groin. As his friend staggered back, Bryce took several steps forward and punched him on the nose. Blood spattered across his friend's mouth. Healy took a few steps back and fell over. Don't ever fucking do that to me again, you poof, Bryce said. Then, leaving him lying on the pavement with blood pouring from his nose, Bryce let himself into the house and closed the front door behind him. As he did so, he heard his mother's slurred voice. That you? Where you been? Out. You've been drinking? There was sharp accusation in her voice. I'm 16. Have you been with any other woman? I haven't, no. I need you badly. Come to Mummy. He climbed the stairs slowly, unsteadily, and reluctantly, hating this, hating himself, hating what the other boys at school would say if they ever found out. He stumbled along the landing and stood in the doorway of his mother's room. She was sitting in her wild pink bag, a cigarette between her lips, and almost empty glass of wine in her hand. Her breast practically falling out of her low negligee, leering at him. Come here, my baby, she said. I'm tired, Mummy. Come and satisfy your mummy. Your mummy needs it so bad tonight, my baby. Without removing the cigarette from her lips, she drew on them, then snorted the smoke around her nostrils, tapped the ash into a saucer, overflowing with butts on the bedside table. A movie was playing on television, one of the hard man action thrillers. She watched it incessantly. Bring it here to me, darling, she said, and suddenly, as if the anger smouldering deep within him had set light to the kindling, there was a burning explosion inside him. He stared with absolute hatred, clenched his fists. He looked at her mahogany Victorian dressing table, at the mass of perfume bottles and the makeup containers, bottles and tubes of creams and lotions and canisters of hairspray, the hairspray. Suddenly, despite his drunkenness, he was thinking with clarity. He dug his left hand into his pocket and wiggled his handkerchief out. Come to Mummy. I have to blow my nose. She frowned as instead of blowing his nose, he wound the handkerchief around his right hand. What are you doing, my darling? He stumbled over to the dressing table, grabbed the hairspray in his handkerchief right hand, pushed off the top of his thumb, then lunged at his mother, pressing the button down hard, directing the jet straight at her face. She stared at him with a look of total surprise. An instant later, as the spray flared up the burning cigarette, there was a fierce roaring sound, and it erupted into flames. She screamed. He kept his fingers on the button, kept spraying as flames caught hold of her hair. She screamed again, wriggled desperately. Her nightdress was on fire now, and the bedclothes. Still he kept the button pressed down. As the flames blackened her skin, her screams became less and less strong, turning into a rasping gasp, until she fell silent, her face all black now, her eyes moving but sightless, two tiny white orbs swiveling in her darkened sockets, her mouth opening and shutting. The whole bed was burning now. He backed away and stood watching in the doorway. As the curtains caught fire and the flames crept up the ceiling, he could still see his mother, her body making small movements, and he could smell roasting meat. Then, with her handkerchief still around his hand, he put the spray back on the bedside table, picked the top off the floor and pushed it back on, then backed out of the room, leaving the door open, and went through to his own room. Keeping the light off, peering down into the street, Healy had gone. Good. There was no one there. Good. As quiet as he could, he opened the window, letting in the night air, opened it as wide as it would go. Moments later, he heard the roar of flames intensify. Hastily, he removed his clothes, pulled on his pajamas and dressing gown, with the glow of the street lamps outside giving him just enough light to see, by pushing his feet into his slippers, and staggered still unsteadily back into the landing. His mother's entire bedroom was now an inferno. The heat was burning his own face, but still he waited until the door frame started burning and the flames began flicking their way along the landing. He walked slowly downstairs, steadying himself on the handrail, smiling, removing the handkerchief, then cramming it back into his pocket. He waited at the bottom of the stairs for some more minutes until the entire upstairs was burning fiercely. Then he pushed open the front door and stumbled out, screaming and sobbing for help. Fire, God, fire, fire, help me, help me. He stumbled around to the next door neighbours and rang the bell, pounding on the door frantically. Fire, please help me, my mother's trapped, please help me. Chapter 52. Wednesday, 30th October. Detective Chief Superintendent Jack Skerritt was a popular man within Sussex Police, a hard man, an old-school, no-nonsense copper who had little truck with political correctness or bleeding hearts liberals. A former commander of Brighton and Hove, he had had a high level of experience both in uniform and in the CID. 52 years old, he was due to retire at the end of the year. He had told Grace a few months back over a drink or at another officer's retirement party that what he looked forward to most of all about retirement was the idea of being able to go into a pub and tell people what he really thought about an issue without being quoted in the press for the following day and then harangued. His views were in general pretty right-wing, but he was no bigoted fool. Skerritt was not in a good mood this morning. He was close to apoplectic over the news of Cassian Pugh's appointment. Grace and Branson sat at the 12-seater meeting table in his spacious office along from Grace's office in the most open-plan CID area on the first floor of Sussex House, while the Detective Chief Superintendent vented spleen. Tom Martinson's a top bloke, he said. I don't get this. I'm going to be having words with him. Bringing that bastard back is like putting a lunatic in charge of the asylum. Shit. When Skerritt had finally calmed down, Grace summarised the situation, then allowed Glenn Branson to explain in depth the reason for his concern that Dr. Carl Murphy's death might not have been suicide. Skerritt shook his head. I hear what you're saying, but I'm not convinced, I'm afraid. I have had my balls chewed off by ACC rig over this department's expense recently, and I can't support you stepping this up to a murder inquiry with all the costs that it entails. From what I'm hearing from you both, if you go ahead, Roy, it'll have to be your decision with clear justification for it. So what the hell do I do, Jack? Roy Grace asked frantically. He seldom lost his temper, but his lack of sleep, combined with Skerritt's intransigence, were taking him perilously close to losing it now. Your experience, you're experienced enough, Roy, Skerritt replied. You have good instincts about when something's a murder, but I don't think you're there with this one. I'm not convinced. Grace tapped the side of his nose. My copper's nose. That's telling me this is a murder investigation, sir. Despite there being a suicide note, checked out by a graphologist, and despite the pathologist's report, I'm still not convinced about the suicide note, but I haven't got anything to substantiate this. Separately, Roy, has any forensic link between the fires been established? I'm on that at the moment. I'm discussing everything that's happened with the chief fire investigator. Skerritt look, one thing is for sure. No one knows the state of mind of someone in the moments before they commit suicide, Roy, but Dr. Murphy was hardly likely to be in a rational state. You don't kill yourself when you have two small children if you're in a rational state. Grace looked at Branson, then looked at the detective chief superintendent. What would it take to change your mind, sir, to support my upgrading this to a murder inquiry? If you can cast doubt on the note, that would change things. If you can convince me it was written under duress, then we'd be getting somewhere. Roy Grace smiled grimly. Skerritt wasn't an idiot. He was probably seeing the overview more clearly than he himself was right now, and perhaps it was the right decision for him to make this call based on what he had been told, but in his heart, Grace was still convinced there was more to it. Skerritt raised both his hands in the air. I have to leave it with you, I'm sorry, but feel free to talk to me about it again. Chapter 53, Wednesday, 30th October. Roy Grace and Glenn Branson returned to Grace's office shortly before 10 a.m. in silence. The pair of them perched pensively at the small round meeting table. Want a coffee? Grace asked. Glenn nodded gloomily. I'll get them. No, Branson silenced him with his hand. You need to keep up your strength for your wedding night, old-timer. Ha ha. Then Grace pursed his lips, balled his right fist, and thumped his left palm. Convinced him it was written under duress. So what the hell do we start with that one? There was a sharp rap on the door, and Norman Potting barged in without waiting for an answer, holding a sheet of paper in a plastic folder and looking pleased with himself. Then he stopped as he saw the grim expression on the faces of the two superiors. Sorry, am I interrupting something? It's okay, Norman, Grace said. Something's urgent? Well, it might be, Chief. The suicide note from Dr. Murphy that you asked me to look at. I think I might have found something. Suddenly he had their rapt attention. Tell us, Grace said. Potting removed the sheet of paper from the folder and placed it on the table. It was a copy of the suicide note with several words circled and annotated in blue ink above them in the margins. He sat down. Grace and Branson followed, moving their chairs closely either side of him. Potting pointed at the name of the solicitor. I decided to start by contacting the law firm to have word with this Maud Ophir to see if there was anything I could glean from her. That's when I learned that there was no such law firm as Ophir Dexter Associates. Grace frowned. I didn't recognize the firm as being a local one, but I suppose it was either a London firm or somewhere else in the UK. Potting shook his head. That's obviously alerted me that something was not right. I did wonder about the name Dexter, the character on television who is a serial killer. Know the program, I mean? Grace nodded. Cleo watches it. I've watched a few episodes too, Glenn Branson said. Ophir is a strange name, Potting continued. I wondered what the significance might be, so I tried it in Google Translate. That detects the most likely language of any word or phrase. If you type it, it came back that it meant victim in German. Shit, Branson exclaimed. Carl Murphy spoke fluent German. Potting went on. His mother was from Munich, hence his Germanic first name. Now, crossword parlance, Maud is not a big jump to Maud, the German word for murder. As a keen crossworder, Carl Murphy would probably have known that. Put those two together into Googling a pop's murder victim. Grace and Branson went silent for some moment, looking at the circle word and the writing above them. I'm speculating, of course, Norman Potting said, but what do you think? Grace barely heard him. He had his phone out and was dialing Jack Skerritt's number with a shaking hand. Chapter 54, Wednesday, 30th of October. Although he was trained both in cognitive witness and suspecting interviewing techniques, Roy Grace rarely conducted interviews himself, preferring to leave the lengthy and carefully structured process to other trusted members of his team while he concentrated on the overview of our case, ensuring he had missed nothing. Later he could study relevant sections of the interviews. He was acutely aware that although 20 years of service in the police had given him a great deal of experience, there was a large red flag that came with all experience, and that was the danger of complacency. It was often the most experienced people who had the hardest falls for that very reason. He read that in many tragic air disasters, the airline's senior captain had been at the helm, including the worst ever in Tenerife in 1977 when a KLM and Pan Am 747 collided. There was a long history of the wrong limbs being amputated in hospitals by senior consultants being careless through complacency, and then there was the tragic fact that all the world's top avalanche experts had died in avalanches. It was for this reason that at the start of every murder inquiry and continuing throughout, Roy Grace would audaciously write down all of his decisions and reasons for them in his policy book, and would check his own procedures off against the structured list laid out in fine detail in the murder manual. But in this instance, he felt it important to see and talk to Red Westwood himself. So, at a few minutes before 5 p.m., he entered the tiny witness interview room, a short distance along the corridor of the first floor of Success House from the conference room where he held his murder inquiry briefing. It was a square, bland, windowless box with 3 crimson chairs, a small round coffee table with water glasses and 3 coffee mugs on it, a CCTV camera mounted high up, and built-in recording equipment. Glenn Branson was already seated there, next to a nervous-looking woman, aged about 30, who was sitting upright on the edge of her chair. Grace winced at his colleague's tie and had already chided Glenn about it early in the day. Interviewers learned early in the training to dress in the plainest possible clothes so as to be wearing nothing that might distract the witness. But it was too late to say anything again. So he turned his attention to studying the young woman and focusing his mind on what he wanted to achieve from the next hour or so. She had an attractive face, slightly narrow, the narrowness accentuated by long, elegant cut, dark red hair, centre-parted that hung either side of it. She was wearing a thin, black roll-neck sweater, a short tweed skirt, black leggings, and black knee-length boots. As he entered, she gave him a wan smile, revealing quite beautiful white teeth, but she was looking on edge. Red Westwood, Detective Superintendent Roy Grace, Glenn said. Then he turned to Red. Detective Superintendent Grace is going to be the senior investigating officer on this case. You're in good hands. He's the best. She smiled, and as she did so, her whole face lit up, before sinking back into the dark cloud that seemed to envelop her. Grace saw in a moment a huge warmth in her. He liked her instantly. He closed the door and sat down. Are you happy for this interview to be recorded, Miss Westwood? Absolutely, she said. She was a strong, confident, slightly gravely voice and smiled as she spoke, but he could see the anxiety in her brown eyes, and it was there in the way she twisted a silver bracelet she was wearing with her fingers. She also wore one ring, a silver band on her right thumb, a thin silver necklace with a crucifix, and several silver charms. Glenn reached across and activated the video equipment. 17:05 hours, Wednesday, 3rd October, Roy Grace said, for the benefit of the recording interview of Miss Redwood, carried out by Detective Superintendent Roy Grace and Detective Inspector Glenn Branson. He looked at Red. It's good of you to leave work early to come and talk to us, Miss Westwood. Thank you. I'm going through hell. I'm really grateful to you for seeing me. She looked at each officer, giving them a nervous smile. She felt safe in this room, in this building. At this moment, she would have liked to stay here forever. I know you gave D.R. Branson a very full statement on Monday night, but would it be an imposition to ask you to go through it all again? Grace asked. Not at all, no. Where would you like me to start? Can you tell me how you met Bryce Laurent? Roy Grace asked. She grimaced, and he saw her small, pretty nose wrinkle. Well, it's a bit embarrassing, really. I'd been in a long-term relationship with my then ex. His name's Dominic Chandler. I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life with him. We were on different journeys. He wanted to have children, and although I did too, I just knew I didn't want to have them with him. We split up, not too happily, but that's another story. Were there any other issues in this relationship? Grace asked. Issues? She asked. She replied. Did Dominic Chandler, for instance, have a history of violence? She shook her head resolutely. No, not at all. Absolutely not. He was very gentle in that sense, and he had nothing to and he had nothing to fear. I was totally faithful to him in the time we were together. Do you have any reason to feel he might be bitter towards you now? Dominic, no, I bumped into him a few months ago at home station. He was very cheerful, told me he was getting married. No, anyhow, he absolutely isn't a violent person. Grace and Branson exchanged a glance, and then Grace went on. Okay, tell us what happened after you and Dominic Chandler split up. I moved out of his flat and got my own place. It felt good to be out of that relationship, but at the same time, I guess I was actually aware of my biological clock ticking. If I was going to have children, then I'd have to meet someone fairly soon. Some of my friends fitted me up with a handful of blind dates, but all of them disastrous. My closest friend, Raquel Evans, thought I ought to try some online dating sites, so I put an ad on a couple of them. What did you say? Grace asked. Glenn opened his notebook, searched for the page where he had written the words down on Monday night. Red blushed and dug into her hand, but actually I've brought it because it might be relevant. She unfolded a sheet of paper and read from it. Single girl tonight, redhead and smouldering, love life that crashed and burned, and seeks new flame to rekindle her fire. Fun friendship, and who knows, maybe more. She looked at the two detectives, a bit cheesy, but she could not read either of their faces. Roy Grace reached out for it and read it to himself, then handed it back to her. C.I. Branson told me that you said Bryce Lawrence was something of a magician. Did he ever use fire in any of his tricks? Grace asked. She nodded. Yes, actually, somewhere in his tangled past, he worked as a firefighter. It's possible he still does. Both men frowned. You think he might be working for the fire brigade, the fire and rescue services? Glenn Branson said. Apparently you're allowed to do other work as a firefighter, especially if you work as a retained officer near an unmanned station. I think you have to work and live within 4 minutes of it. She raised her eyebrow. But to be honest, he could be doing anything right now, and be anyone. When I first met him, he spun me a story of how he'd been an airline pilot in the US, then moved to air traffic control, so as not to be away from home because his wife was sick. That was all a pack of lies. His name wasn't his real name. He had a whole ton of aliases. Do you know them? Roy Grace asked. Some. Bryce Lawrence is one, for starters. I've no idea what his real name is, and he's told so many lies about his past. I'm not even sure if he does anymore, and I know about some of his previous jobs because of the detective agency my mother employed behind my back, but I'm grateful she did now. He was in the Territorial Army as a sapper for a while, but as with everything else, he got kicked out. He worked for a security company installing alarm systems and got the sack from that. He's a talented conjurer, a close magician, I think they call it. He started making a name for himself in Brighton, but lost the plot with that too. Grace frowned. He seemed to have a handy lot of skills set for everything we're thinking might be connected to him. He's a brilliant artist too, very good at cartoons. Which of his conjuring tricks involve fire? Red Roy Grace asked. Quite a few. He used something called flash string, something else called flash wrapper, and then there was flash wool. He was quite into pyrotechnics. He told me he had a silent business making bespoke fireworks. Oh, said Glenn Branson. How much did he tell you about this? Very little. He said he had an interest in a factory, but I've no idea where. Somewhere in Success, I think. You were together for how long? Just under 2 years. And he never took you to this factory or told you where it was, Glenn Branson said, sounding puzzled. You need to remember that during the whole time he was living the lie that he worked in air traffic control at Gatwick. He came home from his shifts and told me about his day and the occasional incidents. He was so convincing I never had any reason to doubt it until my mother showed me the report from the detective agency. Okay, it would be helpful if you could think back and try to tell us as much as you can remember about how you felt when you first met Bryce, Roy Grace said. I was very vulnerable at the time, I suppose. After several years of being with Dominic, Bryce was like a breath of fresh air at first. He seemed genuinely interested in me. He showered me with gifts. I totally believed everything he told me about his background. I mean, why wouldn't I? I had no reason not to. I got really angry with my mother for being suspicious about him. I guess that's what love does to you. It's so true what they say, that love is blind. I was blind, totally and utterly blind for months. I should have sussed, but because none of my friends were comfortable with him. Do you know where he is living now? Grace asked. No, I don't. There's a court extension order on him coming or living within half a mile of you, Branson said. You said you thought you might have seen him outside your office last Thursday, but you couldn't be sure. No. Could anyone have drawn the Queen of Hearts on your bathroom room other than Bryce Lauren? Grace asked. No one, she said. No one comes in my place. Not unless I'm there with them, like a plumber. But how could he have got in? He seems a pretty resourceful guy, Roy, Grace answered. Oh, yes, he's that. One of our first tasks is to see if we can establish a forensic link between Mr. Lauren and the death of Mr. Murphy, the Cuba Libre restaurant fire, your car, and the mini mart, he continued. But based on the fact that he seemed to have been in your flat yesterday, he put the engagement ring back on your finger. You're not safe. We can arrest him if you can find him, but you need to move. I don't think you can consider your place secure anymore. There is a proper panic room in the place now, boss, Glenn Branson said. It can only be locked down, locked from inside. It's impenetrable. That would give Red an hour's protection, enough time for us to reach her. I'm in the process of moving, Red said to them. I should be exchanging contracts soon. Where to, Grace said. Along the seafront in Camp Town. The detective superintendent frowned. Detective superintendent frowned. When is that due to happen? A month to 6 months or so. I really like to move you out of Brighton altogether, Grace said. Move, how do you mean where to? Another part of the country, and change your name and identity until we find this man and have him under arrest. She shook her head. I really don't want to do that. I've got my job here, my new career, and I'm not going to let that bastard beat me. I'm staying in Brighton. It wouldn't be forever, Glenn Branson reassured her. I don't want to lose my job, please. Are you saying you can force me to do that? Grace shook. He said, no, but under police guidelines, I'm going to have to serve you with something called a warning notice, he said, his tone apologetic. It's a formal document that will say it is not possible for us to provide you with round-the-clock protection, and that we advise you to increase your own personal security and to consider moving away as one option. We could officially assign you a witness protection officer, although you have that already more or less in the form of PC Spofford, Glenn Branson said, looking at Roy Grace for approval. But he can't guard you around the clock. Red felt a deep sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach. Moving away possibly was the right thing, but everything she knew and loved was in Brighton and the surrounding area. She had visions of being all alone in a seaside boarding house in an unfamiliar place at the other end of the country, away from family and friends, and how could she keep a job if she did that? The thing is, Fred, that we only have limited resources. We can't give you 24-hour police protection, but we can help you hide, Glenn Branson added. You've just said yourself that Bryce is resourceful. If he wants to find me, he'll find me, just like he found my flat. If he really is behind all these fires, I think maybe he's doing it just to bully me, sort of punish me. I don't think I'm actually in physical danger from him. If he wanted to harm me, surely he would have done that by now. She saw the two detectives exchange glances. Then Roy Grace looked in her eye. Do you think it's possible he wanted to punish Dr. Murphy, punish Carl, for dating you? Red looked into the deadly serious faces of the two men. The idea made her flesh crawl. She felt like she had a tightening tourniquet in her stomach as she realized the implication of what the detective just said. It had been at the back of her mind for days, but she had dismissed it. Bryce had a dark side for sure, but he wouldn't have gone that far, would he? Could he have? Do you think her words fell away. She wasn't sure what she was saying. She felt enveloped suddenly in a dark, acrid fog. Then she heard the black detective's voice, tender now. Red, are you okay? She stared at him through her tears of fear and sorrow. No, please tell me no. Please tell me Bryce didn't. Oh, God. She buried her face in her hands and began sobbing deeply. Everything that had been pent up inside her for the past week now flooded out. Glenn Branson produced some tissues for her and she dropped her eyes, sniffing. I'm sorry, she said. I'm really sorry, God. I thought the day I finished with Bryce, threw him out with PC Spofford's help, I thought that was the day my nightmare had ended. It started to feel now like it was just the day it began. Thanks for listening.